So Rich, what are we going to go through in the webinar today?
Yeah, well, we're going to be covering some relatively new content, a bit of a switch in direction. As people who've been to these webinars up until now will been very heavily centered around prospecting, about pipeline generation, and feels like we've gone into a lot of depth on that. And actually, we did a survey to people who've been coming to the webinars, asking what kind of new content they'd like us to cover. And overwhelmingly, the top answer that we got was we want to start looking at discovery. So discovery is a bit of a beast in itself, but we've decided that we're going to start focusing the next couple of webinars on this specific topic. And today we're going to be really focused around the early part. And what I mean by that is both the lead up, the preparation to discovery, and also the start of the call. So they're the two things that we're going to be really super laser focused on today. But it's such an important topic. It's so crucial that a lot of attention's given to it. Hence why we're kind of breaking these down into sort of bite-sized chunks, if you like, with the first one today.
Awesome. So we've got loads more people coming in now as we just run up on 3 o'clock. So Wendy, Suzanne, Simon, welcome all of you. Drop a note in the chat. Where are you dialing in from? Keen to find out a bit more about who you are, where in the world you're working at the moment. And we're going to get started in a few more minutes.
What I'd love to hear as well is what's one thing that's a bit of a mystery to us is what sector people are from. So maybe you put in the chat kind of what sector. Is it software, manufacturing? Are you in the people business, recruitment? It'd be really interesting to see the different kind of blend of industries and sectors that we have, and the different types of sales people that we've got in the room. So we've got software sales, we've got oil and gas, chemicals, we've got automation, robotics, recruitment. He owns their own business. Great, brilliant. Print management, triggers. I know Triggers well. I believe there's a company called Triggers in the UK. If you work for the same company, Ash. Keep on coming. Just tell us what industry you're in. It's really interesting to see the kind of variety of.
What I'm going to do as well, whilst we just wait for people and we run up on 3 o'clock, I'm going to post our LinkedIn profiles up in the chat. So just while we're waiting, do connect with all of us on LinkedIn. I know every time we do these, we get a load of people connecting with all of us. So I'm going to drop those in the chat fairly soon. And then if you want to connect with us, that's a great place to go for more content. We've all been sharing content pretty much in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, connect up with us on LinkedIn, and we'll be keen to carry on the conversation outside of the webinar. So guys, we're approaching 3 o'clock. We've still got quite a few people coming in. Should we make a start?
Sounds good to me. So, okay, well, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to get into this. So, it does say that the host has disabled attendee screen sharing, Matt. I don't know if that's something that you can rectify.
I hope we can.
Try that.
Right, we're in. Okay, so here we are, everyone. This is bootcamp. We've gone from prospecting bootcamp to sales bootcamp. So, and this is what we're going to be covering today. Purpose of discovery call. We're going to be looking specifically as to what the purpose is, why is it important, and how to think about doing discovery calls in a way that you may not have thought about doing these before. We're going to talk about preparation. I know people might be kind of wanting us to just jump straight into great questions and great tips and tricks of discovery. And yes, we can come on to all of that, but all of that counts for very little until we actually think about how do we prepare. When we don't prepare, we don't have good discovery conversations. We're going to share, in particular, a POLOS framework, which is a framework that we've created, which we feel is really powerful way to get your head in the game ahead of discovery calls, to have discovery calls that win. And then we're going to finish by looking at the first phase of the discovery call, essentially the opening of the conversation, looking at different facets to that opening. We're going to play some real examples from our own discovery calls to back up what we're saying as ever. But really today is all about purpose, the importance, preparation, and the very opening of the call. And what we're going to do in future webinars is really drilling into more of the later stage of the call. As I just start this, I'd love to see in the chat Anybody who has a discovery conversation as part of their sales process, please put the word discovery in the chat, just so that we can make sure we've got all the right types of people on today. Okay, so lots of people saying discovery, some people in big letters discovery, and someone who's got 2 discovery calls to tomorrow. So this is hopefully going to be really good timing. Right, okay. Mark.
Hello.
Why the hell am I showing a photo of Scrubs? I mean, first of all, if you're a Scrubs fan, I might be giving away your age a little bit, even though this wasn't too long ago. But put a Scrubs word in chat just to see if we've got any Scrubs fans. Mark, why have we got a photo of the cast of Scrubs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hello everyone. Welcome back to the webinar. So, today we're talking about discovery, and there's no better reference to discovery than looking at a doctor-patient relationship. Scrubs is a great TV show, but let's just start to focus on real life. We've all been there. We've all gone to see our doctor, and the reason we go is we have a problem. We have a problem where we need some advice, we need opinions, and potentially we need medication. When you walk into that doctor's surgery, they're normally typing away on their computer. And what they're doing is they're looking at your medical record. They're doing their research, their preparation. So when I go in, as an example, my doctor knows already that I've got bad knees, I'm a little bit overweight, my father and family in general have got a medical background with asthma, so they know a little bit about my world. He'll then ask me, what am I doing here today? It's a very specific question, or he'll ask me how he can help me. I'll tell him my problems, and the doctor's very quiet. They let you give away what your problem is. But the response isn't, well, this is what you need to do. This isn't, here's the medication. They don't start talking about the latest drugs that are available, that are award-winning, number one in the marketplace. No, what they do is they seek to understand. They have that face, that look at doctors where you can see they're really starting to think. And they ask you some questions. They ask you, how long has this been a problem for? What have you done to this stage? How have you been managing? How much does this hurt on a scale of 1 to 10? Can you point to exactly where the problems are? And they then may even get their stethoscope out. They may take your blood pressure. Before they do anything like that, they will ask a series of questions, and they'll dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And then even then, I'm sure we've all experienced this, they do some research there and then on the computer looking for what they need to prescribe. And at that point, they prescribe what they think is the right medication. And you take it. You take that prescription, you go straight to your pharmacist, you pay your money, and you take the tablets that have been prescribed to you as often and for as long as you're told. You don't sit there and say to the doctor, can you call me back in a week and I'll tell you my decision? I need to speak to my boss about this. You don't ask for discounts or free trials. You say thank you because you trust what they've said. You know that they're helping you solve a problem that you can't solve yourself. And that is a really effective analogy for what a discovery call should be like. You need to be like that doctor with a patient. You need to be uncovering their problems as deeply as possible. And only then do you prescribe the right medication that's going to cure their problem. And sometimes you're even telling them about problems they didn't know they had. So that, Rich, in a very long-winded way, is why we're looking at a picture of Scrubs.
Yeah, I think so. This whole concept takes it away from a sales. People think of this like a sales call or sales conversation. It actually is about building trust. And what I really liked about that whole analogy is that the patient just accepts what you recommend, and they take your advice. They don't negotiate. They don't ask for 2 months free. They feel that you have understood them. And too often, discovery conversations, I think, are not like that. I mean, Stu, can you share, for example, what did your discovery calls used to sound like, and what was the problems with those?
They were awful. Some would say they maybe still are, but no, they were really, really bad. And I, to be honest, didn't do a lot of discovery. It was more qualification. Find out if they were a good fit from our point of view, and then I'd roll into a generic PowerPoint presentation, which would talk through the company, why we're so great, our office locations. We'd have that standard screenshot of all the clients that we work with and their company logos, and I'm sure everybody's seen at some point. And it was all about us. It was all about, you know, my product, how great it is, all singing, all dancing. And that was discovery and demo all rolled into one, and it was the same every time. You know, nothing changed my sales game more than starting to conduct effective discovery conversations. It's the most crucial part of the sales process. Get that right, and the rest takes care of itself.
I think it's fair to say that we literally have spent individually and as a team hours trying to perfect this part of our sales process more than any other part of our sales process. You know, we this is part of our culture, because ultimately deals are won or lost in this conversation. If you don't get this right, you can almost forget about the rest of the opportunity. And I just want to kind of come back to Mark's analogy and maybe just kind of role play this out so people can get an idea of just 2 points I want to make, but I'll make the points afterwards. Is I'm gonna pretend I'm gonna be Dr. Smith here. So be afraid, be very afraid. And I'm going to imagine that Stu has came into my surgery. And I'm going to do 2 role plays. And we're going to do the first role play, and then I'm going to do the second role play. So, role play number 1. Mr. Taylor, welcome. What have you came in for?
All my hair's fallen out.
Aside from the fact that I haven't fallen out, I've got a bad leg.
Bad head, okay.
Bad leg, sorry.
All right. That was the previous. Can't do anything about the first one, unfortunately, unless you've got some Pritt. So you got a bad leg. All right. Okay. Which leg is it?
My left leg.
Okay. And can you describe? Can you describe when the pain started happening in your left leg?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, probably 2 weeks ago. Right.
Okay. Right. I've got some really fantastic market-leading tablets. They're called Leg Get Better, and these are, you know, they have the finest coating on them. They've won all sorts of awards, and I recommend that you take these twice a day for 2 weeks. Go to the pharmacy with a prescription. Okay. End of role play number 1. Stu, just keen to hear as the patient, how did you feel, apart from completely offended, at the end of that conversation? What did you feel about the prescription that I'd given you?
I'm not sure you're a real doctor, Rich. Nah, it wasn't involved. You didn't find out about me. You know, didn't find out how it happened. You know, how bad the problem was, what brung us in today. There's so much. I don't feel like you're really that bothered. I felt that, you know, you were always going to prescribe that solution from the get-go. Walking
into the pharmacy or walking out the surgery, how confident did you feel that the Leg Get Better medication was going to help you get better?
The market-leading products you suggested. I didn't feel like you knew enough about what the problem was. Like, what I could have went on to tell you is that, you know, I fell over or anything that the problem happened, and none of that information was gathered. So I feel less confident in the solution because you know less about the problem.
Right. Okay. So let's do role play number 2. And we're going to do the same sort of situation. Mr. Taylor, welcome. What are you here for today?
Just waiting for Mark to get in. He likes to repeat himself, so I even give him a pause there. Yeah, I've got a bad leg, Dr. Smith.
Interesting. Which leg is it?
It's my left leg.
Left leg, right. Can you describe when you say you got a bad leg? What is it specifically that's wrong with it?
When I walk, or like when I try to run it, I put weight on the leg. It starts to get like a little shooting pain in the leg.
A little pain?
Yeah, it's always there. There's like a little bit of a pain, but as soon as like I do anything weight bearing, whether that be what, and it gets sharper.
Sure. And where specifically is the shooting pain that you're facing?
Just under the kneecap.
Under the kneecap. Okay. And when do you think this started happening?
It's been happening now for about 2 weeks. Well, pretty much 2 weeks, yeah.
2 weeks. And interestingly, I understand you play rugby in your spare time.
I do, yeah, badly.
Right. Okay. Just interesting. I've had a few patients come in recently who describe similar problems, and they all play rugby. Okay, and when you describe the pain on a scale of 1 to 10, how painful does it feel?
It's getting worse. It's moving on to an 8 now. I would say it's starting to get really painful.
Okay, can you tell me more about when you say getting worse? Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, well, it's been 2 weeks now, and I kind of just thought, oh, it'll go away by itself, but it hasn't. It's just getting worse. It seems like it's getting worse, not better, which is why I've come to see you. Great.
What I'm going to do, it sounds like you've got a problem called bad knee syndrome. I'm going to recommend some tablets. They're called Leg Get Better tablets. Twice a day for 2 weeks. Okay, end of role play. Stu, how did you feel at the end of that? Even though I prescribed you the same medication, did you feel more confident as the patient at the end of that?
Yeah, for a few reasons. One, I think, is because it seemed like you cared and you asked more questions and found out more about me. But also, you made me feel comfortable because you said, other people have a similar thing. You mentioned how other rugby players have had a similar issue, and you become across as an expert in dealing with this kind of problem. Which was a big thing in increasing my confidence of taking the tablets. I'm still not convinced you're a doctor, but I might be more likely to take these.
And the 2 points I was looking to make there is ultimately the first one is that without asking great questions, I couldn't really truly understand what the problem was. The second one is I actually built trust in Stu. Even though I gave him the same medication, he felt more reassured and confident that it was the right solution because I'd asked relevant questions. And this is exactly how prospects will feel. If you don't ask enough questions, even if you provide them and recommend the same product, they're going to feel far more comfortable once you've actually asked them more specific questions and quantified them, because they feel that you understand them, you've done a proper diagnosis versus a 3-question qualification exercise.
Absolutely. We just scratched the surface there with some really basic questions. Obviously, you can dive a lot deeper into some of the things that were mentioned, but it makes a massive difference, even between those two very similar, very simple examples.
Sure. Just question for the audience. On a scale of 1 to 10, how deep do you feel you go with your questions on your discovery calls? And be totally honest. Do you feel like you kind of scratch the surface? Do you feel like there are more qualifications? Do you feel like you go really deep? Number 10 being the deepest.
Russell's 11. Russell, would you be willing to send us a call so we can all listen to that?
Yeah. Get Russell on.
Interesting. Got lots of people sort of 5s and 6s, and I think it's that's kind of what I would expect. I think a lot of the time, I think we can always go a step further. I think ultimately it's about understanding your barriers. But key message there is asking great questions is not just about helping you learn, it's about actually making your prospects feel more comfortable and assured that you understand and that you've got the good solution. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to, well, here's a funny story. We, for some reason, put this slide in. I can't even remember why a week ago when we were preparing. And basically, we figured out a way to mold this into our webinar, which I've totally forgotten about. So
let me help.
Yeah,
let me help. So this slide is in because we were talking about the end result of a discovery call, the end game, Rich. Right? That's the reason. It's not about what superhero is everyone on their discovery calls. So this is what we're talking about. If you can have great discovery calls, and by that, do what Rich just did there. Find the genuine problems, the impact that's having, what they're trying to do to get to solve this, then you can start to talk about the end game. And the end game is where you're either working together or you're not. And qualifying out is fine. There's been times where I've gone to doctors and he's told me to wait and see. There's no medication needed here today. But it's all about that end game. Gather as much information as you can. Share with them what you need to, have a consultative discovery call, but you need to go deep enough with your questioning so you can map out all the stages from that call to the end game, which is hopefully signing them up and having them as a customer, because you know the exact problems they have, you know how badly they need to solve them, the consequences of not solving it, flipped with the results of solving it, and you know how your product is going to help you do that. And if you can now all of that in a discovery call, your demo and your negotiation calls are so much easier because you have all the right ammunition to be able to value prop and present your product as the ultimate tablet for their headache. So that, Rich, is the second time I explain why we have a slide, why we have Avengers Endgame.
One question that I wanted to just from Ash is, how long should a discovery call last? I've had occasions where the prospect's got a bit annoyed that I'm asking so many questions. Stu, what's your response to that?
It is how long's a piece of string. I guess how long have you agreed for your discovery call is the most important thing there. Have you asked for 10 minutes? Have you asked for 30 minutes? Managing and being respectful of the prospect's time is really important. Only you know what it takes. However, I think that's just in 30 minutes. You've got to use that time as effectively as possible. The big thing is, and I think this is a dangerous situation, is discovery can become interrogation, and they're two completely different things. You need to, find the information that you need to find out, but it also needs to be a conversation. It doesn't need to be interrogation where you're just firing over a load of questions and the prospect feels like they're being a little bit intimidated and you're asking information. But you've also got to earn the right to ask the more difficult questions. Don't necessarily go straight in at the deep end and ask the customer, why they're not hitting the revenue numbers at the moment. A VP of sales or something is going to be a little bit reluctant to start answering that information. But as you build up trust and you build up their confidence in you, you can start to ask more and more difficult questions. 30 minutes is more than enough time. I would say, Ash, if you're never going to get any more than 30 minutes from a prospect, from a discovery conversation, I think that's a really good amount of time where you can go really deep and get a lot of information.
I think the key here is as well, Ash, is if you ask meaningful questions and maybe explain why you're asking them, and you're using customer stories and you're not making it just feel like it's an interrogation, customers will give you more time. They get comfortable because they understand the rationale of why you're asking. And sometimes I've just found a good technique is saying, listen, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions here. I just want you to know that you're comfortable with that. It's just so I can make sure that I'm really recommending the best possible solution. And I think if you just kind of make your intentions known, it goes a long way just to getting them on board with that.
We're going to touch on that as well, and we'll talk about this, but it's setting the agenda in that upfront contract so the customer knows or the prospect knows what's expected of the conversation. So you've set your stall out early, they've agreed to what you're going to do, and we'll touch on that in this webinar actually and talk through that. I think that's a really important piece of it, and it stops the prospect feeling like it is an interrogation. You've almost asked permission in advance to ask those questions.
Yeah, I think in my experience, just to chime in as well, is I think you can sense when you're asking too many questions. You can sense that back in the tone, maybe how short and sharp their responses are. But
Mark.
In my experience, well, listen, we all do it, right? In my experience, the times where I know that I've asked too many questions or I'm starting to get on their nerves is when I ask yes questions. Just questions where we both know the answer is yes. We both know that it's a loaded question, and I feel like people find that a bit tiring. So do you like what you see here? Yes. Could you see yourself using this? Yes. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like yes, loaded questions are what frustrate people because they just feel like you're going through ticking boxes. You may be qualifying them really hard, and that's when it gets a little bit tiring as well. It's about the quality of the questions and making sure that each question moves the needle in a significant way in your calls.
Just quickly to add on to that as well is you can ask questions without really asking questions. Something that we do a lot is mirroring. It's really.
Say that again, Stu?
I did it in the role play, didn't I? You said, oh, it's a little bit of pain, and I kind of said, little bit.
Yeah. And that's really powerful because you're not really asking a question, but it is a question. And once you say that back, the prospect will elaborate on what they've just said. And it's rather than asking, what do you mean a little bit? Rich just went little bit, and I started talking again and telling him more about that. That's a really good way of mirroring. If you're not familiar with that, Google it, check it out. It's a really good technique. It is, Jimmy. Yeah, it's a Chris Voss technique.
Just one last thing I just wanted before we move on. It was a really interesting question from Dan Wall, who said, what if your vendor number 5, 6, 10 they've spoken to that day? I'm going to assume you're asking that question, Dan, in a competitive situation. In my opinion, you shouldn't feel that you shouldn't do good discovery just because like the customer's a bit tired of speaking with vendors all day. This is your process. This is key. You have to be sure that you understand that what that prospect is trying to achieve and how you can help them. Otherwise, you just become a transactional salesperson. And the reality is you'll not be the company that they choose to work with if you don't do discovery. If you just come in and give a kind of a generic product demo, I can guarantee that you're down the pack. So don't let that put you off.
What happens in those situations is when somebody is in a competitive situation like that, it's normally easy to get that information because they come to the table with the reasons that they're speaking with you.
Great point.
They're aware of the market. So you can normally, expedite the process and get to it a lot quicker. And don't be scared to do that. If that is a buyer who wants to move quicker, then you've got to do that as well. You don't always have to go softly and build up the conversation.
Just Jedson has asked about good examples of problem questions. We are going to do a future webinar probably in 2 weeks' time, talking and giving some real examples of questions. But for now, we're just talking about the actual start of the call. But I want to move on to... Do you
want me to explain why we've got this slide, Rich?
I know why we've got this slide, Mark.
Are you sure?
Too often in discovery calls, for the most important, crucial part of the sales process, like, we're not helping ourselves. We're literally going at these calls with like 30 seconds worth of research on, for example, someone's LinkedIn profile. You're damaging yourself. I can't recommend enough how doing good quality research and preparation ahead of a discovery call can make the whole process seem a lot easier. You may be thinking this is boring stuff compared to what we normally talk about, but this is so important. Otherwise, we wouldn't have included this here. And so I just want to go through each of these. And this is a little bit of a method to kind of getting ready for discovery calls. So we're going to start by number one, research your prospect. And I'm going to show an example of how I would do research on my prospect within the space of about 3 minutes. So this is not taking an hour, just three minutes, and how much insight you can get ahead of a call that you've got coming up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you with a real life prospect. I'm going to show you the kind of the steps that I'll work through. So,
just while you're doing that, Rich, one or two people have said in Q&A and privately that they're not able to see the usual chat flow that we have, and I believe that Zoom's now restricting your ability to see that. But we are getting all of your responses, guys. There's huge numbers of people chiming in, so do keep that coming. It's great to see so many questions, so many points being made. So, just want to reassure you, we are seeing that, but you might not be able to.
Great. So, let's imagine I've got a call coming up with Charles here. So this is the kind of the process that I'd normally go through when researching the person I'm about to speak with. And I'm going to show you that in 3 minutes, how much I can learn from this person. So the first of all, of course, I'd look at his name, job title. I'd scroll down to look at his job history. First things first, I can see where he's working for now, CB Insights. Interestingly, I've picked up that he's only been there since February. So he's new to the role. So immediately in my head, I'm thinking, okay, he's new to the role. He's probably 3 months in, 4 months in. He's probably looking to put a bit of a stamp of authority into it, into what he's doing. So that's a talking point in itself. I then think about, okay, any person coming into a new job role, they're probably set with some key objectives. They've got that job and they've been given some, this is what we'd like you to achieve. So I can start to think about, okay, these are questions I would like to ask Charles on the discovery call is, what are the top things that he's looking to tackle in the first 3 months of his new role. Interestingly, I see he used to work for a training company called SalesShare, which happened to be a training company all around helping salespeople improve discovery calls. Quite ironic. But again, this kind of shows me that this guy's actually clued up. Discovery, he's a big believer in this. And actually, when it comes to how Refract can helping him improve the quality of discovery calls, maybe that in his reps at CB Insights, this guy's going to be really well informed. I'll then go actually look into trying to learn a bit more about Charles as a person. What's his personality like? And I can see, even in his activity, he's using phrases like very cool. Now, you might be thinking, so what? But this is important because it shows that he's actually he's got a casual personality. He's not really formal. He's not rigid. He's probably quite a laid back kind of guy. And I can tell that by just looking at some of the kind of the phrases that he's using in his dialogue on LinkedIn. And then I can see that he's actually wrote some posts as well. He's wrote articles about the 10-step discovery call framework. He's passionate about this area. And again, this is just useful stuff that I can reference at the start of the discovery call. Oh, Charles, I loved your article about the discovery call framework. How are you looking to leverage that in your new role? It's like, these are just great things that you can learn by just investing a few minutes in looking at the prospect. And finally, I'll actually look at the company level as well. What can I learn about this company before I speak with him? Well, first of all, LinkedIn gives this great feature called Insights, where I can see that they've got 77 people in sales. But more interesting than that, I can see that their sales team has actually grown by 7% in the last 6 months, 38% in the last year. So I'm thinking this is a fast growth company. That can backed up further by seeing that they've currently got 6 current job openings in sales as well. So they're a company that's hiring salespeople, building the team out. I'm thinking about how can Refract potentially help him with their onboarding, with their ramp time of new hires, things that I know that Refract can help with. I've spent, 3 minutes, and how much have I learned and understood about this person that I didn't understand before? And this hasn't taken me an hour of time, but it's helped me got so much more prepared by just doing that little exercise. And that's all, something that we can all be doing is just, what can you learn in 3-4 minutes that you didn't know before? And all of this stuff just helps me get more about, build a picture in my head about who this person is ahead of the call itself.
Totally, Rich. I think it's a massive point. I think, like, just to build on that as well, one thing I always do, and it frustrates me when I listen to calls, people will say, like, where are you in the world?
Yeah.
That's a tiny little thing that you should know before the call. This guy's in New York. How's your day starting in New York this morning, Charles? Like, little things that actually show you've done a little bit of research in advance, so you haven't gone into this blind and you've took time to have a look and find out a little bit more about them.
Yeah. Another point is, like, people are always trying to think of, like, small talk. And small talk is usually all about the weather. It's boring. But how much is Charles going to enjoy this conversation more if I start the conversation by referencing the article that he wrote about discovery calls? He's going to be like, God, yeah, that's something he's clearly passionate about. So much more interesting than talking about what's the weather like in New York when I don't really care.
Well, what have we said, though, in all previous boot camps? Everyone's most interesting topic is them. It's their number one favourite topic. If you can start the small talk about them, you're on to a winner. They're going to get a little hit of adrenaline. They're going to get really excited. They're going to know you've done some research. And they're going to just feel good about this conversation. And when people feel good, their brains are more engaged and more active as well. Like you say, no one gives a shit about the weather.
No, not. And even that thing like the company growing, it's got your opportunity to an advisor. When I speak to similar companies, Charles, where the company's grown as quickly as you have in the last 12 months, these are some of the problems they're facing. How are you dealing with those?
Perfect. So we're going to move on to the next part of the preparation. If I can find it.
On the top. There we go.
Okay. Researching similar customers. Stu, do you want to talk about why this is important?
Yeah, I think this is really important. So, we all know how important stories can be in sales and telling stories, but especially having the right stories. So find the company that you're looking to speak with, try and find some of your clients that you work with or people that you've spoken with who are as similar to them as possible. So you've got good stories to tell. There's nothing worse than you're an SME and you speak with somebody and they're, banging on about how they work with Google and Vodafone and big enterprises like that when you're a company of 20 people. You can't relate. Everybody as a person wants to relate and feel like it's relatable to them. Those stories can be really powerful as well because, like Rich did, he said, I've spoke with a number of rugby players recently. We can do that as salespeople. I've spoke with sales leaders like you with companies such as X, Y, and Z who've had exactly the same challenges, Rich. What they've done is X, the result has been this, and it's just a far better story. But crucially, having them in advance, practicing them so you're comfortable telling those stories in advance and having them ready makes it much easier so you can start to inject them in your discovery conversation.
It's also a little bit of a tip there. Customer stories, I always frame them as like, it's almost like I call them the discovery call safety blanket. If you're on a discovery call and you don't know where the conversation's going, like you've kind of hitting that dead end, your kind of safety blanket of just referencing how you've helped a similar customer is always just a nice thing to go back to. And it's important that you just have a clear idea ahead of time around who those similar customers are. Mark, what about the next part, which is listening to calls and reading message trail? Again, that might sound obvious, but it sounds like, from my experience, that it's not something that a lot of people do very often.
Most don't, Rich. Like, let's take an example in a previous life or with other people that we may have spoken to. They've got a lead generation team, as an example. They've booked a meeting for them and that meeting's in the calendar. What they might do is go to that lead generation, that SDR, and go, tell me about this meeting then. And what's happening now is they're going to get a regurgitation. It's going to be SDR opinion of why they think they want to talk. And that's what they take for granted. The reality is, you should be reading or listening back to those initial conversations. And that's something that I do religiously. So if we talk about Refract for a second here, if we think about two SDRs in particular, let's talk about John and let's talk about Nia. Someone's just asked what an SDR is. That's someone in lead generation. Jonathan, like they main goal is to book sales qualified meetings for BDMs. So let's take John as an example. John will book majority of his meetings through LinkedIn. He's incredibly successful at doing it. But when he puts a meeting on for me, I will read that transcript, those messages. And what I'm really looking for is the exact language that the prospect has used to confirm that they have these problems, how they summarize the world that they're living in, the reasons they give for wanting to take a meeting, how excited they seem. And those nuggets of information help me. They help me on the call. But let's take Nia. So Nia books most of her meetings over the phone. I always listen to the call recordings. And in those recordings, I hear tonality, I hear inclination, I hear again the words in which prospects use to describe their problems, to confirm how much what Nia's saying resonates with them, why they're excited. And when I have that insight into the way in which they describe their challenges, how important this seems to them, I can relay that back. I can probe further. And also, you just sound so much more consultative when you start that discovery call with, listen, I've listened back to the call that you've already had with us. I've read the transcript. And you can use it to probe as well. Oh, I noticed you told my colleague Nia that one of your biggest challenges is your sales reps don't upsell and cross-sell as often as they should. Can you tell me more about that? What you do is immediately just create this comfort zone where they think this guy gets it. I don't need to be doing discovery and qualification again, even though that's what you're about to do. They feel like you're on par with them. You know why you're talking. And because you can use their language back to them and really hit on the points that they've already relayed back to you, you have a deeper conversation.
Yeah, it's great point. And I think what is also, as speaking as someone who's been sold to quite a bit, there's nothing worse than feeling like you're being asked the same questions, given the same information that you've given to an SDR, to an account executive. It just annoys you and winds you up. And so there's no need to do that. Do your homework, listen to the calls, read the message trails, and make it seem like there was, bring that to the table in the call itself. And the last bit is actually preparing for the conversation itself. And you might be thinking, well, hang on, we've already done that. No, what we've done is we've done the preparation around like the prospect and the similar customers. What I'm talking about here is actually preparing for what we're going to look to achieve in the actual conversation itself. And what we've actually created is a framework, and it's we sent this to our designers to create a nice image for this, which took them a while to come back, but we call it the POLOS Framework, the key here is that we're going to break down what each of these letters equates to when it comes to preparing for the actual discovery call itself, as far as what that conversation is going to sound like. And this is a discipline that I want everybody to try and get themselves into ahead of every single discovery conversation. It might feel like a lot of the time you're putting the same answers down, but believe me, when this just really helps get yourself in the right frame of mind. So here's the POLOS Framework. So we're going to go through each one of these one by one. And this is about what I would like everybody to think about. You could just note this down before every discovery conversation. And this is going to help you massively have really good conversations before you go into them. So first of all, what are the biggest problems this prospect is likely to have? Stu, can you just talk about a little bit about that side of things and how that would equate in our world?
Yeah, we kind of give you an example just a few minutes ago with Charles and the problems. We found out in his LinkedIn that the company's grown rapidly in the last 12 months, hiring 38 new sales hires. I know that sales leaders I speak with on a regular basis who grow so quickly have a real challenge getting people up to speed as quickly as they would like. They can't get people revenue generating as quickly as they need to hit the forecasting and to hit their numbers. So I know that's a potential problem that somebody like Charles might have. So that would be on my list as a potential problem. But I also speak to similar people day in, day out. What are people like Charles facing in their everyday jobs that our problems solve? So I've got an idea of the problems that we solve in advance, so I know where to take the questions. One of the big challenges is as well, we're all saying we've got to find the problem and get the customer to find out what their challenges are. Often prospects don't think there's a problem. They're not aware of an issue. Things are going all right. They're quite happy until you show them a new reality with your product or whatever it may be. They mightn't realize that the way they're doing things today is a challenge and that there's a better option out there. So sometimes coming to the table with the problems and mentioning them makes the prospect realize that is something they should maybe spend more time focused on trying to solve.
What's key here is there may be like, you might think, oh, well, my problem solves 10 different, my product solves 10 different problems for customers. And that is often a big challenge. Like, where do you direct the conversation? But the key here, Stu, is, it might be that for some prospects, by doing that little bit of research beforehand, that you actually figure out, as you said, there is maybe one of those problems that you want to focus on, for example, ramp time, more than something else.
It's just places to go as well, Rich. It's not like assuming that. It's the areas to have a conversation. I might speak to Charles and he might say, no, people got up to speed quicker than ever. The challenge we've got is the old people, the people who have been here ages, they're not hitting the numbers they need to. It could be a completely different thing, but you know where you're going to take the conversation just to find out if you're right or not, if your hunch is right or not.
Possible objections, Mark. What about that?
Yeah, so every conversation we have, there are going to be objections, be that tiny little ones or perhaps big ones. What you need to do is just prepare for that. What possible objections are you going to face in this call? Right now, every sales rep's getting objections, right? Everyone's going through this grey cloud, this storm together of what is coronavirus. So some of the objections you're going to get straight away. Budget, timeframes, staff being furloughed, etc. So we can prepare for that. But let's move that aside. Let's start to think about, you're going to have maybe different objections with different customer types, different industries, different products or services they might be taking. The easiest thing to do is to prepare, and by preparing that I mean is you practice and you think about other conversations you've had and the objections that you faced. And the reality here is that if you're not prepared for an objection, the high chance here that your defense barrier will just go up, a knee-jerk reaction where you're going to sound defensive to that objection, when we all know the best thing to do is to embrace it, ask some questions, and give the right response back and articulate that well. And you can only do that with muscle memory, with a cool and calm attitude. And the best way to do that, as I say, is to practice. Practice with yourself, practice with a colleague, share objections that you've had, ask your colleagues what they would do in that situation. And when you are in that right state of mind and you hear these objections, the defense barriers stay down, you embrace them, you have better conversations, and you are a more trusted advisor. Think back to a doctor. You might object to the doctor. You might say, is this necessary? Do I have to do that? They're cool and calm, because they know they're going to help you. Do you know what I mean? They don't get defensive. They say, look, this is what you need and this is what's going to help you, and they can handle that properly.
Number 3, what do I want to learn? Again, it seems like quite an obvious question, but Stu, give some context to that one.
Yeah, let's go back to that slide that we put in for a really specific reason, the end game. Think of what you want to get at the end of this conversation. I normally try and think, when I go into a discovery call, what do I want to know from this prospect? A, to make sure if they're a good fit or not, but B, also, what am I going to show them in the demo? I go into the discovery call with the demo in mind, thinking, what are the problems they have that we can solve in the demo, so I can show them how we solve them. And it's key questions as well. That can be what you want to learn, the answers to those key questions. It could be, we look at the sales team, the revenue, the ramp time, as we've mentioned. All of those could be key things, but the places for you to go in the discovery conversation, so you know in advance what you're trying to find out, and it makes it easier for you to have that conversation around those areas and find them out when you're actually speaking with a prospect.
Yep. And possible outcomes of the call, Mark. I just thought it'd be one outcome there.
Well, they take the medicine or they don't. That's the reality, right? The whole discovery call, the end game is, are you going to be moving forward? So the outcomes are either you are moving forward, and there's obviously a number of different steps you might need to take, but there is a moving forward proposal here, and you iron that all out, or it's just not for them. And that might be it's not for them right now. It might be it's not for them at this point in time. But you just got to know what are the possible outcomes and be comfortable with that. I would say this is more about being comfortable with the outcome, disconnecting from that anxiety of you must have a successful discovery call, you must book a next step. Stop worrying about that because you're thinking about yourself. Just worry about how you're going to help them, i.e. what problems they have, what objections there might be, what you need to learn to give them the right medication, and stop worrying about the 2 possible outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's really key there. Again, it's like a cold call. Like, the objective of the cold call is not to book a meeting. It's to find someone who's got a problem or someone who wants to talk to you a bit longer. It's the same thing with a discovery conversation. The outcome of this discovery conversation might be, actually, we've since established we can't help you. And again, it's just go to that mentality. Stop thinking about a discovery call as the route to getting a sale. It's not. It's that classic thing of always be disqualifying in sales. And I think this is really key in this sense as well. It's perfectly good, perfectly fine. In fact, it's embrace that you get the end of a discovery call and you figure out you can't help this prospect. Save yourself some time. Move on to someone who you can help. And the last part, we've already kind of covered that. But who else have we helped with similar problems? Is about who is relatable to that customer that you've already worked with, that you can name drop, that you can talk about those stories, and again. Do this for every single conversation. What you'll get is something that looks a bit like this, where I've just taken Charles, who we were looking at before. The biggest problems is likely to have, so that he was on a hiring drive, so long ramp time, replicating top performers. I put in here bouncing back after maybe a tough previous 8 weeks with all that's going on in the world. The possible objections, I can almost become very intelligent and guess what these are likely to be, in the sense of probably going to be some budget pinches in the business. There's going to be a bit of a thing around cost cutting. What do I want to learn? Well, I want to learn more about, they're a reasonable sized company, CB Insights. What's their management structure? What's the conversion ratios of the current team? Historically, what's their ramp time of getting new reps up to speed? What are the possible outcomes for the call? Well, probably an outcome would be a demo with Charles and other managers in the business, but equally, it could be this isn't a good fit for now. And who else have we helped with similar problems? I've just named 2 companies there, similar size, with similar challenges that we've solved. It's amazing what happens when you just put down this framework. Again, this takes literally 10 minutes. And for the most important part of the sales process, just having this, I just feel so much more in control and confident before I actually go into the call versus just winging it, which I think happens far too often.
Be honest in the comments. Does anyone here feel like they go into discovery calls winging it? They don't really plan? Or on the flip, is there anyone here that does something similar? They write down and they plan for their discovery calls.
Yeah, we'd love to hear what other people do from their preparation, if any of these things are kind of similar to approaches that other people take. So got a couple of yeses. I always do a pre-call plan. It's great. We were shouted at if we did any prep. Lots of pre-call plan. Never plan really, but I have main questions. POLOS is a great framework. Good stuff. Good structure. Do it on the fly. So actually, it feels like that's a part that, generally speaking, it feels like people are really strong at. But again, if you're stuck for a good method of preparation, then POLOS is a good framework to use. Right. So we're going to move on to the final part of the webinar, and this is where we're going to be using some real call examples. I know people are very big fans of this, but we're going to really, we've gone through the why of discovery, the preparation. We're now going to get into the meat and potatoes of it, and actually going to be looking at the opening of the call itself. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's going to talk to us a little bit about what is the important thing to do at the start of the call. And we're going to play some real examples of our own discovery call openings here too.
Yeah, so I've gone into Refract. I've dug out a few of our discovery calls, particularly been focusing on the opening of that call. This is where you set that agenda, that upfront agreement, and this is critical to the flow of your discovery call. This is where you say to them, we've only got a sandbox amount of time here. This is the agenda. This is what we're going to achieve and why. What you're doing here is you're setting expectations, you're setting boundaries, and you're telling them what is going to happen if this is a successful discovery call. Get the agenda right, that upfront agreement, and you set the tone and pace for your entire discovery call and beyond. Trust me, a weak agenda and a weak discovery call is when you start to lose control, you start to get questions back, they start to derail you as well, and that's why you've got to get this right. So as I say, I've got into Refract, I've dug out 3 agendas, and what I want to do is I want to break them down as a team here, but I also want your comments. I want you to listen to these agendas, and I want you to imagine you are on the receiving end of this agenda. You are about to go into discovery call, and this is the agenda that's set. What do you think? So let me share my screen. Host has disabled attendee screen sharing. Matt, are you back at your old tricks?
No, it's Rich.
Right, okay.
I think I need to make you the host, Mark. Hang on.
Classic.
There you are.
Right, we're in business.
You might need to unplug your headset for this as well, mate.
Yeah, headset's coming out. We see the Refract platform.
Yes.
Awesome. So, Stu, I found one of your calls from the other day. Listen to this. Stu, first of all, nice talk versus listening time, mate. Great level of engagement. This is looking like a good call on the face of it. Good volume of questions asked. Let me play for you the
Perfect to change.
let me play for you the agenda that you set. And as I say, I want people to comment away. Imagine you're on the receiving end of this.
Yeah, no worries. I do have. Great. And I guess the purpose of the call, Elia, was just to have a quick chat, find out a little bit more about your role, what you do, and share a little bit about Refract and how we're helping similar organisations, and explore if there is a good fit. And if it turns out that there is from this conversation, then we can schedule some more time to speak and dive a little bit deeper. And if not, we can part as friends. But let's see, which path makes the most success if that all works for you. Yeah, for sure. Let's do so.
Awesome. So there's our first agenda. Where are the comments? I seem to have lost all of these comments now.
Yeah, so spot on. Sounds like my ideal intro. Very clear, straightforward. Good next steps laid out. Relaxed opening.
Why don't you break this down, Rich? This was Stu's call out. Why don't you tell us what you'd be thinking?
Yeah, I think this was a good agenda. I think not too pressurized. I think is the key message there. Stuart sounds quite casual. I mean, he's quite a laid back guy in general, anyway. But he just feels like this is not a high pressure sales conversation. His tone just makes it feel very like a relaxed. And it's amazing just how someone sounds, and the fact that people have mentioned that already, not what he's saying, just makes it really a really nice intro. And he's kind of said, purpose of the call is for me to find out a little bit more, and if we, see if there's a good fit here. And if not, we can, if there is a good fit, great. If there's not, we can part as friends. It's just reassuring. I think it's the best way I can summarize that. And a lot of it comes from the tone of Stu's voice. Really is so key in this.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for breaking that down. Let's flip this though, Rich. Let's go to one of your calls. So yeah, I mean, having a look at this call, let's play your agenda.
Time's not as good as mine, Mark. I don't know if you've noticed.
I have noticed that, yeah, Rich is dominating with 50.1% of the call. It's classic Rich, this. What else we got there? He's asked a bucket load of questions. Not this even distribution though, Rich. I like it. And you suggested quite a few things. Okay, awesome. Well, let's play your agenda. Again, in the comments, tell us what you would be thinking if you're on the receiving end of this. And then, Stu, you're going to break this down for us.
And the purpose of the call today is really just to, for me to learn a bit more about you and your sales team there at Oxford Global, and to by the end of the conversation figure out if there's a good fit here or not. If there is a good fit, typically what would happen next is we'd schedule a demo where I can actually show you how we might be able to help. But if we get to the end of the call and you think it doesn't make sense, I'm more than happy just to leave it there. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. I know.
Okay, right. So the comments are coming in. Bit of pre-closing there. I picked up on that, but rather than what I think, Stu, why don't you tell us what you're thinking if you're on the receiving end of that?
Yeah, I think there's five or six things I'd break down that call and mention for that opening why I think it works really well. Up front, Rich has stated the purpose of what the conversation is today. So the prospect's immediately aware of what they're going to do. He stated that he wants to learn about them. It's quite a casual word, but it's quite a nice word, that he wants to learn and find out more about him and his sales team, making it all about the prospect. End of the conversation, he's not said, that the next step is going to be a demo. He's give the prospect a way out. It's two ways. Let's use this time. End of the conversation. If there's a good fit or not, there's a way out for the prospect as well. The prospect's fully aware of what's going to happen as well. I think that's an important thing. Sometimes salespeople, we forget that prospects might be a little bit worried. Rich is not going to ask for his credit card details at the end of this conversation. He's not going to try and sell him Refract. He just wants to use this time to see if we can help. Then we can schedule a next conversation. And one thing that's really important for me is he's gained the agreement of the prospect. They've upfront stated that that's fine. They're happy with that. They're happy to answer the questions. They're happy that that's the next step. If they do find there's a good fit, they've gained that agreement. And the prospect used a word like perfect. Like, you can't really get a better word than that. They've agreed, said that sounds perfect. Here we go. He set up a nice discovery call. a nice conversation starter so we can start to ask the questions.
One of the things I really like is telling them that, look, a typical next step is an online demo. You're not telling us what's going to happen. You're just telling them a typical next step. But Rich, a couple of comments. Some people are saying you're talking about a demo too early. Some people are saying that they love that you talk about the demo. As I say, I've shared with you what I think, but tell us about your rationale here.
I think, yeah, it's fair comments. I think if I'd said what will happen at the end of this as a next step as a demo, I would agree that would have been too forward, and actually maybe it wouldn't have been the right time. Maybe it would have needed the next step might have been a further conversation. For example, what I was saying is typically what happens is I'm kind of saying this may be what happens as one outcome, but that's the norm. I'm kind of making them kind of prepared that is what normally happens in these situations. But I think the key word there is typically, as you say.
Yeah, I would say that is a good thing. I think you want to know if that is the most likely outcome of it. Well, not the most likely, but one of the outcomes is a demo. That's the next step. I think you should tell them because you've gained the agreement. So when Rich then at the end of the conversation sounds, look, Mr. Smith, it sounds like we found a really good fit. Let's go ahead and book that demo as we discussed. Yeah. How's the calendar looking tomorrow? I think that is kind of, I think Sandler called it that upfront contract. That contract is stated so everybody knows what's expected.
I think the key word is typically. We're just telling them that typically this is what could happen next. You've given them an out, but you've equally told them what's going to happen. But let me play my next clip. So another one of yours, Stu. You've been gassing on this one, 53.9% since we're doing the battle of the talk versus listening. But right, okay. Let's play this clip here. So again, fire away with your comments if you were on the receiving end of this agenda.
Business that you're doing. I guess the idea of this call is to have a brief chat, share a couple of ideas how we're helping similar organisations, explore if he is a good fit. If he is, we can schedule some more time to speak, which will probably involve a demo of Refract. And if he isn't, I guess we can part as friends, but we'll see which path is the best one to take, if that all works for you, Lisa.
Yeah, good job. Yep, perfect.
So someone who clearly liked being told the potential steps here. I feel it's quite similar to your first one, but what did everyone else think of that, Rich?
I mean, for me, I think you could just hear it in the prospect's response. This was someone who was completely happy and on the same page, and you know, you could just hear it how almost pleased she was. That saying, "Yep, that sounds great to me," and that just says it itself. Like, you know, that from that moment onwards, she just feels so much reassured by what the objective of the call is. Because she feels reassured, she's probably going to be more open with Stu with his questions. This is what's so powerful about this approach and how Stu asked the question there, was he achieved complete alignment with the prospect. And I think, again, just that approach of saying, you know, we can part ways as friends. It's like a nice thing to say of like, you know, there's not going to be any bitterness here at the end of the call if I figure out that you don't want to move forward. You know, it's kind of, you're just completely just lowering that resistance and down, which is so key, and just getting the prospect on side.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. All right, lads. Well, that was my bit of the week, but I think what we should do here is really summarise. Well, I want people to be able to walk away from this webinar and to start levelling up their agendas. Let me stop my share because I think, Rich, you've got a bit of a summary slide. Is that fair?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. So you just want to make me host again, Mark?
So
just right-click on my name on the panelists.
You wouldn't think this was the 7th time we've done this, would you?
Oh, I've never done this. Make host. This is all new. This. Right, we're in business. Rich, you're the host.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is show you just the summary of this approach. So we've called it the key ingredients, the discovery call agenda. So first of all, the purpose of the call today. Set a clear, very strong purpose of what you want to achieve on the call today. To learn about / to share some ideas. This is the key, the bit about that. This is what the purpose is: to learn about your team, your process, your problems, your challenges. To share some ideas is a really nice way of kind of saying, you know, this is something that you can actually get from this. At the very least, if all you get is some new ideas that you didn't have before, it's a really nice phrase. I think Stu used it in one of his call openings. Typically, what happens at the end of the call is you're making the prospect aware of a possible outcome, and then finally, does that sound fair for you? Does that sound fair? You're getting agreeing. You're getting the agreements from the prospect on saying, "Yep, I'm on board with that," or "No, they can tell you why they're not on board with it. But more times than not, you'll feel that they'll buy into it, and you've got just a much clearer idea of what the actual intentions of the prospect are at the end, and hopefully you're in partnership with them. So there's just a nice kind of key ingredients of that agreement.
I'm keen. I know everyone that's signed up for this is a sales professional, and that's why they're here to learn and level up. But who feels like they can come away from this session and improve their call agendas as a result of what we've gone through today? It'd be helpful to hear that.
It sounds a simple thing, but it's a massive piece. I think you said it earlier, Mark, as well, that control. This sets it up nicely so you've got that control to then start the conversation. Without that agenda, you often get in a discovery and somebody with a classic "tell me what you do," and they start to take control of the conversation, and you're on the back foot.
Just going to wrap up very quickly. Probably haven't got a chance to go through all of them, but is pitfalls to avoid when it comes to starting the call. And the first one I just want to talk about very quickly, just 30 seconds on each of these, lads, is dealing with the "tell me what you do." That situation where you get a prospect that just says, just tell me what you do. I'm just interested to find out more about what you do. Stu, how would you approach that?
Going back to what I said, I think that agenda helps, and you probably get that less often once you've set the agenda because they've already agreed. And you can even use the agenda again if somebody asks you. Actually say, well, I'm happy to do that, but what I want to do is find out a little bit more about you and your role first, or you and whatever first. And then you can go in and try your ask your questions again. Appreciate some will push back and will still say, I just want to know what you do. What I would do is almost revert back to the cold call. Typically, when I speak with sales leaders like you, they've got one or two of these problems, or two or three of these problems. Which one resonates with you the most? Get it back into problems, getting them agree, and then you can dive deeper into those problems again.
Yeah. Second one is don't start calls with "tell me all about your role." As a buyer, I used to hate being asked this question by salespeople. But Mark, maybe you want to touch upon why that's such a rubbish question to ask.
It's too broad. You're asking someone to write a blank check for you. Like if we go back to the doctor analogy, when you sit down, a doctor doesn't go, "Tell me about your life." They say, "Why are you here today? How can I help?" I actually had this the other day. Had an inbound demo. It was a company that sold power tools. Started a discovery call, and you could tell that he just wanted me to give him a pitch. He was just like, "Look, just tell me what you do." And I just said to him, that's the equivalent of me coming into your tool shop saying, "Tell me about your tools." You need to know what job I'm looking to achieve at home. And that, I don't know, it hit home for him, and he very quickly realized that I needed more information. So I think with that opening question of, tell me about your role, first of all, you should know about your role. You should know about your ICP and their role. Secondly, focus it more. Ask them about what they're looking to achieve. What's the top couple of things on their agenda for this quarter? And that's where you're going to get a more focused answer. And remember, you haven't got loads of time. Discovery calls are sandboxed calls. Time is finite. You've got to be asking questions that are going to give you specific answers for you to give the right diagnosis.
Yeah. And plus for me, I just feel like you need to, asking a question to, say, a VP of sales or VP of marketing saying, "Tell me about your role," it kind of is a little bit like, I just feel like saying, well, you should know what my role is all about. Really, it's a kind of a lazy question. However, if you can ask me instead, can you share with me the top 2 or 3 things that you're working on right now? What your top 2 or 3 initiatives? It's a much more powerful question. Much more, you're going to get a lot more out of it versus just asking a prospect what their role is. We're going to have to wrap up there because we are at the top of the hour. Hopefully that was really useful for everybody. What we're going to be doing in the next webinar is taking a deeper dive into the discovery call. We're going to be looking into more around the key questions you can ask, how to build pain in conversations, how to ask really effective discovery questions. But we're going to save that for 2 weeks' time. But for now, hopefully that's been useful for everybody. We'll send out the recording to everyone and look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time where we're going to go deeper into the discovery call.